The Galaxy Council Citadel was the largest structure Captain Dong-Su had ever seen. It floated in the darkness of space like a small moon made of glass and metal, spinning slowly around a pale white star that belonged to no one. Hundreds of ships from dozens of species were docked along its outer ring, each one larger and more advanced than anything the human fleet had in public service. Dong-Su stood at the observation window of the human diplomatic shuttle and stared at it all with a calm face, though his chest felt tight. He was 38 years old, tall for a Korean man, with short black hair and a scar running along his jaw from a training accident years ago. He had served in the United Terran Defense Force for 16 years, and had been to the Citadel 3 times before. Each visit had felt the same. The other species looked through humans like they were furniture, polite sometimes, curious occasionally, but never impressed, never worried. Humanity had only held a seat on the Galaxy Council for 12 standard cycles. In galactic terms, that was nothing. Most species on the Council had been members for centuries, some for thousands of years. Humans were the new ones, the quiet ones, the ones who arrived with basic ships, basic weapons, and basic shields, and sat politely in the back row while the older civilizations decided the shape of the galaxy. Dong-Su turned from the window as Lieutenant Bo-Ra approached. She was shorter than him, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression that never seemed to leave her face. She handed him a datapad. "The council session starts in 2 hours," she said. "Ambassador Drawl of the Cathari Dominion is requested to speak first. That is not a good sign." Dong-Su took the pad and scrolled through the briefing. The Cathari were a reptilian species, large and aggressive, with thick scaled skin and a military culture that respected only strength. Over the past 2 months, they had been expanding into neutral space near the human border. 3 human outposts had gone silent. Supply ships had been raided. 17 people were missing. Earth had filed complaints through the proper channels, and each time, the complaints had been ignored. "Admiral Tejo wants us to push for a formal grievance today," Bo-Ra added. "He wants the council to intervene." Dong-Su nodded slowly. He knew what would happen. He had seen it before. The council would listen. They would nod. And then they would do nothing, because humanity did not have enough power to make them care. 2 hours later, Dong-Su stood at the back of the great council chamber. It was a circular room, enormous, with rising tiers of seats arranged in a half-dome shape. Each species had its own section, decorated with their colors and symbols. The Cathari section was draped in dark red banners. The Veluwuri section, where High Arbiter Olen sat, glowed with soft blue light. The Thaline section shimmered with water-like patterns that moved across the walls, and the human section was small, plain, and near the bottom. High Arbiter Olen opened the session. He was tall, nearly 3 meters, with a thin insectoid body covered in pale gray chitin. His forearms moved gracefully as he spoke, and his voice was translated into a dozen languages through the chamber's systems. He welcomed the delegates, reviewed old business, and then turned the floor over to the Cathari. Ambassador Drawl rose. He was massive, even for a Cathari. His scales were dark green, his eyes yellow and narrow, and when he spoke, his voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. He did not waste time. He told the council that the Cathari Dominion had a historical claim to the contested sectors near the human border. He said the Cathari were simply reclaiming what was theirs. He said that any human presence in those areas was an illegal occupation. Dong-Su felt his hands tighten into fists at his sides. The human representative, a civilian diplomat named Dr. Yuna's colleague, stood to respond. He presented the evidence calmly. The coordinates, the attack logs, the missing colonists. He asked the council to enforce its own neutrality laws and to order the Cathari to withdraw. Drawl laughed. It was not a quiet laugh. It echoed through the chamber, and several other delegations shifted uncomfortably. He looked at the human section and spoke slowly, making sure every word was clear. The humans have a small fleet, small guns, small shields. They sit in their small corner of the galaxy and pretend they belong here. If they cannot defend their own borders, that is not our problem. It is natural law. The weak do not hold territory. They never have. Dongsu's jaw clenched. He looked up at Councillor Fea, the Thaline representative. She was an aquatic species, her skin a soft blue-green, and she watched the proceedings with large, kind eyes. She spoke in humanity's defense. She reminded the council that neutrality laws existed for a reason, and that allowing the Cathari to bully a younger species set a dangerous example. But it was not enough. When the vote came, it was quick and decisive. The council would not intervene. The Cathari expansion would be treated as a bilateral dispute, and humanity was advised to resolve it through direct negotiation. Direct negotiation. With a species that had already attacked their colonies. Dongsu walked out of the chamber in silence. Bo-Ra followed him, equally quiet. They returned to the human ship and sealed the door behind them. Dongsu sat in the command chair and stared at the far wall for a long moment. Then he opened a secure channel to Earth. Admiral Taeho's face appeared on the screen. He was in his 60s, with gray hair cut close to his scalp, and eyes that had seen decades of service. He listened as Dongsu gave his report. The refusal, the mockery, the vote. When Dongsu finished, there was a silence that lasted 5 full seconds. Then Taeho spoke. His voice was low and steady, and there was something in it that Dongsu had never heard before. It was not anger, it was certainty. Then it is time, Taeho said. Authorize Aegis. The channel closed. Dongsu sat back in his chair. He did not know the full details of Project Aegis. Almost no one did. But he knew one thing. The galaxy had decided that humanity was not worth protecting, and now humanity was going to show them why it had never needed their protection in the first place. Deep beneath the surface of Earth's moon, in a place that did not appear on any map or any public record, there was a facility called Chandra Deep Labs. It was buried under 300 meters of lunar rock, shielded by layers of signal-blocking material so thick that even the most advanced alien scanners would see nothing but dead stone. The facility had no windows. It had no signs. It had only one way in and one way out, and that entrance was hidden inside a mining operation that the rest of the galaxy believed was just a slow, boring human attempt at resource collection. Dr. Yuna had not seen sunlight in 4 months. She did not mind. She had spent the last 7 years of her life in this place, leading a team of 600 engineers, physicists, and soldiers toward a single goal. She was 35. With dark hair she kept tied back in a simple knot, and glasses she only wore when she was reading data screens for too long, which was almost always. She was quiet, careful with her words, and had a habit of smiling slightly when she was about to say something that would make a room full of generals very uncomfortable. Today she was standing in the observation room above testing chamber 9, watching the final combat trial of the Mark III battle armor. Below her, behind reinforced glass rated to withstand starship-grade weapons fire, Sergeant Ha-Rin was moving. Ha-Rin was 26 years old, and the youngest soldier ever selected for the Aegis program. She was not tall. She was not large. In her normal uniform, she looked like any other young Korean woman you might pass on a street in Seoul. But right now, she was inside a Mark III suit, and she was anything but ordinary. The suit covered her from head to toe in sleek dark gray plating that shifted and rippled like liquid metal. It had no visible joints, no exposed wiring, no bulky attachments. It looked almost simple, almost elegant, and that simplicity was the most dangerous lie humanity had ever told. Because the Mark III was not simple at all. It was the most advanced piece of military technology any species in the galaxy had ever created. And no one outside this facility knew it existed. Yuna watched as Ha-Rin moved through the combat course. 12 combat drones activated at once, firing plasma bolts from every direction. Ha-Rin did not dodge. She did not need to. The suit's nanoplating absorbed the plasma on contact, converting the energy and feeding it back into her own weapon systems. She raised one hand, and a focused beam of repurposed energy cut through 3 drones in a single sweep. She then did something that would have made any alien military commander lose sleep for the rest of their life. She walked toward a sealed blast wall, 2 meters of reinforced titanium alloy, and passed through it. The suit's molecular phasing system allowed her to move through solid matter for short distances. She appeared on the other side without slowing down, and destroyed the remaining drones in under 4 seconds. Total time for the course, 19 seconds. Previous record, 23. Yuna pressed the intercom button. Good run, Ha-Rin. Your phase timing is improving. Ha-Rin's voice came back through the speaker, slightly breathless, but cheerful. The suit does most of the work, Doctor. I just pointed in the right direction. Yuna smiled that small, quiet smile of hers. Do not let the generals hear you say that. They spent 12 trillion credits on this project. They like to think the pilots matter. She turned from the glass and walked down the corridor to the briefing room, where a secure screen was waiting. Admiral Tejo's face appeared on it. He looked tired, but there was a sharpness in his eyes that told Yuna the waiting was over. The Council refused to help, Tejo said. The Cathari mocked us openly. Draal called us weak in front of every species in the galaxy. Yuna nodded slowly. She had expected this. They all had. In fact, they had planned for it. The truth was that humanity had been lying to the galaxy since the day they first made contact. When human scouts first encountered alien civilizations, 20 years ago, they had watched carefully before introducing themselves. They had studied the galaxy's history. They had read the records. And what they found was terrifying. 3 times in the last 2 centuries, a younger species had risen quickly, developed powerful technology, and begun expanding. And 3 times, the older civilizations had formed coalitions and crushed them before they could become a threat. It was never called war. It was called containment or stabilization. But the result was the same. The young species was broken, their technology seized, their worlds occupied. Humanity saw this and made a decision. They would not rise quickly, they would rise quietly. Their public technology, the Mark I exoskeleton, was deliberately unremarkable. Good enough to justify a seat at the table, poor enough to make everyone ignore them. Behind that mask, in places like Chandra Deep Labs, a real work continued in silence. The Mark I was a basic powered frame, useful for heavy lifting, mildly helpful in combat. Every species in the galaxy had something similar. The Mark II was better. Integrated weapons, enhanced mobility, stronger shields. It existed in classified Terran files, but it had never been shown to anyone outside High Command. The Mark III was something else entirely. It was a weapon system wrapped around a human being, connected directly to the pilot's nervous system through a neural link so fast that thought and action happened at the same time. The suit's AI predicted enemy movements before they happened. Its dimensional fold shielding could stop anything short of a planetary bombardment cannon. And every single suit had its own miniature warp drive, allowing the pilot to jump through fold space across short distances instantly. One Mark III pilot had the combat output of a Cathari gunship. 12 of them could take a space station. And humanity had 400,000 of them, hidden in facilities across the solar system, waiting. Taeho looked at Yuna through the screen. I'm sending 1 platoon to the Citadel. 12 units. They will arrive as an honor guard for our delegation at the next session. Yuna raised an eyebrow. Just 12? 12 is enough to make the point, Taeho said. We are not starting a war, Doctor. We are ending a conversation. After the call ended, Yuna walked back to the observation room. Harin was out of her suit now, sitting on a bench in the changing area, drinking water. She looked up when Yuna entered. We are deploying, Yuna said simply. Harin set down her water. Her expression changed. The cheerfulness was still there, but underneath it, something harder appeared. Something patient and ready. It is about time, Harin said quietly. Yuna leaned against the doorframe and looked at the Mark III suit standing in its rack, dark and still and waiting. She thought about all the years of secrecy, all the lies, all the times she had watched alien diplomats pat humanity on the head like children. They think we have been sitting in the corner, playing catch-up, she said softly. We have not been catching up. We have been waiting. 2 days passed at the Citadel, and the tension did not go away. It grew. Captain Dong-Su could feel it in the corridors, in the way other species looked at each other, in the way conversations went quiet when certain delegations walked past. Something was coming. He did not know what, but his instincts told him to stay sharp. The Cathari had not left after the council session. That was the first warning sign. Normally, after a vote, delegations returned to their homeworlds. But Ambassador Drawl stayed. His guards stayed. And then on the second day, Warlord Gasso arrived. Gasso came with a fleet, not a small one. 14 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in a perfect formation around the Citadel, each one bristling with weapons. They were long, angular ships with dark red hulls and sharp edges, built for one purpose and not bothering to hide it. The Citadel's traffic control objected, but Drawl calmly explained that it was a standard diplomatic escort. The council allowed it because the Cathari were powerful, and powerful species were given room. Dong-Su stood at the window of the human ship and counted the warships. 14. Each one carried enough firepower to glass a small moon. He turned to Bo-Ra. Get me a secure line to Earth, he said, and tell the civilians to stay inside the ship. Bo-Ra nodded and moved quickly. She did not ask questions. She had learned a long time ago that when Dong-Su got quiet, things were about to get loud. That evening, Dong-Su received an unexpected visitor. Counselor Feia of the Thaleen came to the human docking port, alone, wearing a simple robe instead of her formal council attire. Her blue-green skin shimmered under the corridor lights, and her large dark eyes were filled with worry. Captain, she said, her voice soft and fluid, like water over stones, I must warn you, I have heard things. The Cathari are not here for diplomacy. Warlord Gasso did not bring a fleet to talk. Dong-Su led her inside and sealed the door. What have you heard? Feia hesitated, then spoke. Drawl plans to provoke an incident. Something that will give the Cathari an excuse to use force against your delegation. He wants it to look like humanity started it. If he succeeds, the Council will not defend you. They will blame you, and the Cathari will have their war. Dong-Su was silent for a moment. He looked at Feia and saw that she was afraid. Not for herself, but for them. She was the only council member who had ever treated humanity with genuine kindness, and right now, she was risking her own position to deliver this warning. Thank you, Counselor, he said. I will not forget this. Feia left as quietly as she had come. Dong-Su immediately called Bo-Ra and the security team together. He told them to prepare for a boarding action. They checked their Mark I suits, tested their weapons, and secured every entrance to the human ship. It was not much. Dong-Su knew that. Mark I suits were strong enough to stop small arms fire, But against Cathari shock troops with heavy plasma weapons, they would not last long. He sent an encrypted message to Admiral Tejo. The response was short. Aegis platoon is in position. Hold the line. Hold the line. Easy words. Hard to do when you were outgunned 10-1. The attack came at midnight, Citadel Standard Time. There was no warning, no demand, no communication. The Cathari simply cut through the outer hull of the human ship with breaching charges and poured inside. They came fast and hard. 20 shock troops in heavy combat armor, carrying plasma rifles that glowed red-hot at the barrel. They expected to find sleeping diplomats and a few guards with outdated equipment. They found Dong Su and his team waiting for them. The first corridor erupted in weapons fire. Dong Su fired from behind a barricade, his Mark I suit absorbing the heat of near misses, while he placed his shots carefully. Bo Ra fought beside him, her face tight with concentration. The human team held the line for 2 full minutes, which was longer than anyone would have expected. But the Cathari were strong. Their armor was thick. Their weapons hit harder. A plasma bolt struck Dong Su in the left shoulder and burned through his suit's plating. He grunted, dropped to one knee, and kept firing with his right hand. Blood ran down his arm inside the suit, warm and wet. Bo Ra, he said through gritted teeth, "Get the civilians to the safe room, now." "I am not leaving you here," she snapped back. "That is an order, Lieutenant." She stared at him for one hard second, then turned and ran toward the inner sections, shouting for the diplomatic staff to move. Dong Su and 4 remaining soldiers held the corridor. The Cathari pushed forward step by step. Their lead trooper, a massive soldier with gold markings on his helmet, kicked aside a fallen barricade and pointed his rifle at Dong Su's chest. "Humans," the trooper said, his translated voice dripping with contempt. "Always so fragile." Dong Su looked up at him. His shoulder was burning. His suit was cracked. He had maybe 10 seconds before the Cathari overwhelmed them completely. Then his earpiece crackled. Admiral Tejo's voice came through, calm as a still lake on a windless day. "Aegis platoon inbound. Estimated arrival time is now." Dong Su blinked. Now? The lights in the corridor flickered. The air itself seemed to hum. A deep, low vibration that Dong Su felt in his bones more than he heard with his ears. The Cathari troops paused. Their instruments started giving readings that made no sense. Energy signatures were appearing behind the human line, massive signatures, as if a warship's reactor had just powered up inside the corridor. The gold-helmeted Cathari trooper looked past Dong Su and froze. Behind the human defenders, the air tore open. Not like a door, not like a portal. It was more like reality folded in on itself for a brief, impossible moment. And through that fold, 12 figures stepped into existence. They were human-shaped, but they were not wearing Mark I suits. They were not wearing anything Dong Su had ever seen in his 16 years of service. They were covered head to toe in dark gray armor that seemed to move and shift like a living thing. No visible joints, no exposed wires, no bulky weapons mounted on shoulders or arms. Just smooth, flowing plating that caught the light and bent it in strange ways. They stood perfectly still, 12 of them in a line, and the corridor temperature dropped 3 degrees from the energy they were radiating. The lead figure was slightly shorter than the others. She tilted her head at the Cathari troops. Sergeant Harin had arrived. Dong Su let out a breath he did not know he was holding. He looked at the gold-helmeted Cathari trooper, who was staring at the 12 armored figures with wide yellow eyes. "You were saying something," Dong Su said quietly, "about fragile." For exactly 1.5 seconds, nobody moved. The Cathari shock troops stared at the 12 armored figures. The 12 armored figures stared back. The corridor was silent, except for the low hum of energy radiating from the dark gray suits, and the distant sound of alarms echoing through the ship. Then the gold-helmeted Cathari trooper made a decision. He raised his plasma rifle and fired directly at Harin's chest. The bolt hit her square in the center of her armor. It was a shot that would have burned through a Mark I suit, through a Cathari battleplate, through the hull of a light cruiser. It struck the nanoplating of the Mark III and simply disappeared. The energy was absorbed into the suit like water into sand. Harin did not move. She did not flinch. She did not even tilt her head. Then her suit glowed, just for a moment, as the absorbed energy was redirected. She raised her right hand, palm open, and a focused beam of white-blue light erupted from it. It hit the Cathari trooper's rifle and vaporized it. Not his hand, not his arm, just the weapon. The melted remains clattered to the floor in a shower of sparks. The trooper looked down at his empty hands. Then he looked up at Harin. "Next time," she said, her voice flat and calm through the suit's external speakers, "I aim higher." That was when the real fight began, but calling it a fight was generous. It was more like a lesson. The 20 Cathari shock troopers opened fire all at once. Plasma bolts filled the corridor with burning red light. Any normal force would have been torn apart in seconds. The Mark III operators did not even bother taking cover. They walked forward, each of them absorbing fire like it was rain, their suits drinking in the energy and growing brighter with every hit. One operator raised both hands and projected a wall of redirected force that sent 5 Cathari soldiers flying backward into the wall. Another operator sprinted forward at a speed no human should have been able to reach, closing a 10-meter gap in less than a second, and disarmed 3 troopers with precise strikes to their wrists and weapons. No killing blows, no lethal force, just broken rifles and stunned soldiers. Harin moved through the center of it like a ghost. Her suit's AI fed targeting data directly into her brain through the neural link, and she processed it faster than conscious thought. She knew where every enemy was, where they would move next, and exactly how much force was needed to stop them without ending them. She twisted past a plasma bolt, caught a Cathari soldier's arm mid-swing, redirected his momentum, and sent him spinning into 2 of his companions. All 3 went down. One Cathari trooper retreated behind a sealed blast door, a heavy reinforced barrier designed to withstand explosive decompression. He slammed his fist against the lock panel, and the door sealed shut with a deep metallic thud. He pressed his back against it, breathing hard, thinking he was safe. The Mark III operator on the other side of the door did not stop walking. The molecular phasing system activated. The operator passed through 2 meters of solid metal like it was air, and emerged on the other side, standing directly in front of the terrified trooper. The operator simply pointed down the corridor toward his captured companions. The trooper dropped his weapon and walked. The entire engagement lasted 2 minutes and 47 seconds. 20 Cathari shock troops, the best soldiers their empire had to offer, were subdued. Every single one of them was alive, bruised, disarmed, and shaken to their core, but alive. Captain Dong-Su watched from the floor, where he sat with his back against the wall, a medic already working on his shoulder. Bo-Ra stood beside him, her eyes wide, her mouth slightly open. She had seen a lot of combat in her career. She had never seen anything like this. "What are those suits?" she whispered. Dong-Su shook his head slowly. "I do not think we are supposed to know." Outside the human ship, the situation was changing just as fast. Warlord Gasso sat in the command chair of his flagship, watching his tactical display with growing confusion. The boarding party has stopped responding. That was unexpected, but not alarming. What was alarming were the energy readings his sensors were picking up from inside the human vessel. 12 individual signatures, each one putting out more power than a Cathari destroyer's main reactor. That was impossible. Those were readings from a warship, not from people. Before he could process this, a broadband communication channel opened across all frequencies. It reached every ship in the Cathari fleet, every delegation on the Citadel, and every monitoring station within 10 light-years. Admiral Tejo's face appeared on every screen, calm, composed, and absolutely certain. "This is Admiral Tejo of the United Terran Defense Force," he said. "Approximately 3 minutes ago, Cathari shock troops conducted an unprovoked boarding action against a human diplomatic vessel under Council protection. That action has been stopped. All Cathari personnel are alive and in our custody." He paused. Let the silence do its work. "I am now informing the Galaxy Council and the Cathari Dominion that the technology you have just witnessed is designated Mark III battle armor. It is not a prototype. It is not experimental. The Terran Defense Force currently maintains 400,000 combat-ready Mark III units across our territory. Our fleet has been retrofitted with equivalent systems. Across the Citadel, in every delegation chamber, there was silence. Complete, absolute silence. Species that had barely noticed humanity for 12 years were now staring at their screens with expressions that ranged from shock to fear to something that might have been admiration. Gasso gripped the arms of his chair. His tactical officer turned to him with a pale face. "Warlord, if those readings are accurate, and they have 400,000 units at that power level, then their military output exceeds our entire fleet by a factor of—" "I can do the math," Gasso snapped. Tejo continued speaking. "We are offering the Cathari Dominion one opportunity to withdraw their fleet from Citadel space and return to their own territory. This offer will not be repeated." Gasso's jaw tightened. He was a warrior. He had never retreated from anything in his life. His pride screamed at him to fight, to test these humans, to call their bluff. Then a new voice came over the channel. It was younger, female, and utterly calm. "Warlord Gasso." It was Harin. She was standing in the corridor of the human ship, surrounded by the unconscious bodies of his best soldiers, her dark armor still humming with absorbed energy. "I can be on your bridge in 6 seconds. I am being generous with the count." Gasso stared at his screen. He looked at the energy readings. He looked at his tactical officer. He looked at the remains of his boarding party's last status report. He gave the order to withdraw. 14 Cathari warships powered up their engines, turned away from the Citadel, and jumped to faster-than-light speed. In 30 seconds they were gone. The space around the Citadel was empty and quiet. On the human ship, Harin lowered her hand from the communication panel. She looked at Dong Su, who was watching her from across the corridor, with his shoulder half-bandaged and something close to wonder on his face. 6 seconds? He asked. Harin shrugged inside her suit. "Honestly, I was rounding up." The Galaxy Council chamber had never been this quiet during a full session. Every seat was filled. Every delegation was present. Species that normally sent junior representatives had dispatched their senior leaders overnight. The Thaline, the Veluri, the Ranith, the Solari. Dozens of civilizations that had treated humanity like background noise for 12 years were now sitting in their seats, watching the human section with an attention that bordered on fear. Captain Dong Su stood at the speaker's platform in the center of the chamber. His left arm was in a medical sling, the shoulder wound cleaned and sealed, but still aching beneath the bandage. He wore his dress uniform, simple dark blue, with the Terran Defense Force emblem on the chest, and he stood straight, despite the pain. Bo-Ra was behind him, along with 2 members of the diplomatic team. They had no guards with them. They did not need any. High Arbiter Olen opened the session. His forearms were folded tightly against his thin body, and his compound eyes moved across the chamber with unusual restlessness. He was nervous. Dong Su could tell. An insectoid species that had run the council for 3 centuries was nervous because of what 12 humans in gray armor had done in less than 3 minutes. The Council recognizes the delegation from Earth, Olen said. His translated voice was formal, controlled, but there was a tightness in it that had not been there 2 days ago. Captain Dong-Su, the Council requires a full explanation of the military technology deployed during last night's incident. We also require an explanation for why this technology was concealed from the Council and its member species. Dong-Su looked up at the tiers of alien faces staring down at him. He had spent the entire night preparing for this moment. Admiral Taeho had offered to send a professional diplomat. Dong-Su had refused. He was the one who had been shot. He was the one who had stood in that corridor while Dral's people tried to kill his crew. He would be the one to speak. He took a breath and began. High Arbiter, members of the Council, I will answer your questions directly. Humanity developed the Mark III battle armor over the course of 7 years in a classified program. We did not reveal it because we were not ready. Not because the technology was not finished. It was finished 3 years ago. We were not ready because the galaxy was not ready to see us as anything other than a minor species with nothing to offer and nothing to fear. He paused. The chamber was so silent he could hear the soft hum of the translation systems. When humanity first made contact with the wider galaxy, we studied your history, we read your records, and we found a pattern. 3 times in the last 2 centuries, a young species developed advanced technology and began to grow. And 3 times, older civilizations formed coalitions and destroyed them. You called it containment. You called it stabilization. But we looked at the results, and we saw young worlds burned, young fleets broken, and young species forced into obedience. Not because they were a threat, but because they might become one. Ambassador Dral shifted in his seat. Several other delegations looked uncomfortable. We decided that we would not let that happen to us, Dong-Su continued. So we hid. We showed you our Mark I suits, which are simple and unimpressive. We kept our real work secret. We let you believe we were weak, because being underestimated was safer than being targeted. Every smile, every polite nod, every time we sat quietly in the back of this chamber, while other species decided our fate for us, we were buying time. He let that sit for a moment. Last night, the Cathari Dominion attacked our diplomatic vessel without provocation. They tried to kill our people. And when we asked this council for help 2 days ago, you told us to solve it ourselves. His voice did not rise. He did not shout. He spoke like a man stating facts about the weather. So we solved it ourselves. He looked directly at Olen. You asked why we hid our technology. That is why. We hid it because the galaxy punishes species that grow too quickly. We hid it because we needed time to become strong enough that punishment was no longer possible. And we hid it because we wanted to choose when and how the galaxy learned what humanity is capable of. Last night, the Cathari made that choice for us. He straightened. I want this council to understand something clearly. In the engagement last night, 12 Mark III operators neutralized 20 Cathari shock troops in under 3 minutes. Every single Cathari soldier survived. We did not kill anyone. We chose not to. Not because we could not, but because we could afford not to. That is the difference between strength and cruelty. We know the difference. We hope the Cathari will learn it. The chamber remained silent. Then Councillor Fea stood. Her blue-green skin caught the light as she rose, and her voice was steady and warm. The Phaline delegation moves to formally elevate humanity's standing on the Galaxy Council to full strategic partner status. We further move to impose sanctions on the Cathari Dominion for their unprovoked attack on a diplomatic vessel. The vote was swift. It was not unanimous, but it was overwhelming. Species that had ignored humanity for years voted in favor. Not all of them did it out of admiration. Some did it out of fear. Some did it because they wanted to be on the right side of whatever came next. Humanity's seat on the council moved from the back row to the inner circle, and the Cathari Dominion received the harshest sanctions the council had issued in decades. Ambassador Drawl sat through the entire vote without speaking. When it was over, he stood, looked at Dong-su with those narrow yellow eyes, and walked out of the chamber. He did not say a word. Dong-su watched him go. Then he turned and walked back to the human section, where Bo-ra was waiting. She looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. "That was a good speech," she said. "It was the truth," he replied. "That is all." Far away, on Earth's moon, Dr. Yuna watched the council broadcast on the main screen in Chandra Deep Labs. Her team had gathered around her, engineers and physicists and soldiers, all watching in silence as the vote results scrolled across the display. When the final count appeared, a quiet cheer went through the room. Someone else laughed with relief. Yuna did not cheer. She smiled, that small and knowing smile, and turned off the screen. Harin was sitting on a bench nearby, out of her armor, wearing a simple gray uniform. She had a bowl of instant noodles balanced on her knee, and was eating with chopsticks, watching Yuna with curious eyes. "Do you think they will ever actually trust us?" Harin asked between bites. Yuna thought about it. She thought about the way Olen's hands had trembled slightly when Dong-su spoke. She thought about the way Feiya had stood up for them, not once, but twice. She thought about the fear and the awe and the respect, all tangled together in the eyes of every species that had watched their broadcast. "No," Yuna said honestly, "but they will respect us, and for now, that is enough." Harin nodded and went back to her noodles. In his office at Terran Command on Earth, Admiral Tae-ho sat alone. The screens around him showed news feeds from across the galaxy. Every major network was running the story. The Citadel incident, the Mark III reveal, humanity's new status. Analysts from 100 species were debating what it meant, how it would change the balance of power, and what humanity would do next. Tae-ho ignored all of it. He opened a single classified file on his personal screen. The file header read, Project Aegis, Phase 2, Mark IV Development, Status in Progress. He read the first page. The theoretical capabilities of the Mark IV made the Mark III look like a toy. Neural integration that was not just reactive, but predictive. Armor that could not just absorb energy, but generate its own gravitational fields. Individual soldiers who could operate in hard vacuum, underwater, and inside a star's corona. A weapon system that could crack a moon. He closed the file. He leaned back in his chair. He looked out the window at the blue-green curve of Earth below, where 8 billion people were going about their lives, most of them unaware of what had just happened on their behalf. He allowed himself a small smile. Just a small one. The galaxy had learned today that humanity was not weak. That was good. That was necessary. But it was only the beginning. The galaxy did not yet know that humanity was not just strong. Humanity was patient. Humanity planned ahead. And humanity was already building something that would make the Mark III look like ancient history. Tae-ho closed his eyes. The smile stayed.